Holy spontaneous vlog, Batman! So, it's come to my attention that at the San Diego Comic-Con, there were some DC-related doings that came up, like the official timeline, but I'll get to that in just a minute. Something that caught my eye was, I guess DC's been selling reprints of older stories. I guess they're calling them facsimile copies or something like that. They've been selling those for a while. I haven't seen them anywhere, but, that's just me. And apparently they've become really popular, so much so that I guess, people at DC are saying that they're more popular than their current stories. And I guess Dan Didio was like, yeah, that's kind of a failure on our part. No freaking surprise!
I will punch you again and again.
That people are more interested in 3-4 decade old stories than they are in their current ones. Not that the current ones are not selling. People seem to be more interested. And a fellow named Joe Hill said that, I guess he was positing the possibility that, these older readers who have kids are buying these older stories for their kids to read and getting those kids interested in the comics.
I just want my kids back.
And that's kind of the mentality that if they had acknowledged it, they could have avoided this in 2011. This whole, New 52 Rebirth mess that they've created for themselves. Oh, look at the little Easter eggs and little scraps of goodness they gave us in between the heaping piles. I can't remember where, but I could have sworn shortly after the New 52, someone said something along the lines of, yeah, these fans are getting older, but they'll share their comics with their kids. Believe it or not, we do procreate. I know the Big Bang Theory makes that seem like a very unlikely possibility, but yes, it happens. Not me personally, because, well, I look like this. Consistency. Okay? I know DC's changed their continuity even before Flashpoint, but I just find it ironic that people who defend the New 52 from its critics say, all you want is the same stories over and over again. And yet, here we are with older stories being reprinted, selling better than the current stories.
Shouldn't we be learning something?
I might be misusing the prefix here, but I don't think that's ironic. I think that's meta-ironic. And if younger readers are being drawn to older stories, I guess people's problem with these ridiculous reboots had little to do with nostalgia and just that some stuff was just written better. Now, the other thing is that Dan Didio announced the editors were working on an official DC timeline, where I guess they were basically going to try and explain how, the history of these characters and how their relationships, came to be and how they interconnect and all this stuff. And he was apparently quoted as saying that the failing of the New 52 is that they didn't think this out. Congratulations on being 8 years behind everyone else, Danny boy. I mean, it was obvious they didn't think everything through after Flashpoint, when this whole thing was launched. I'm sure there's some excuse they could give, we were under so much pressure from Warner Brothers to boost sales and so forth. I don't think they were going to shut down DC. They probably would have gotten someone other than Dan Didio to be in charge, which would have been the smart thing to do, quite frankly. So it's not all on Didio necessarily. Some of it's on Warner Brothers' higher-ups, which, depending on who you ask, don't really care about the physical comics themselves. Now, they want to try streamlining their continuity, make it less complicated, and so forth. Great. Rebirth is about reintegrating pre-Flashpoint elements even better. But let me just say this, and if you watch enough of my show, you know where this is going. They can explain away all the problems for the Green Lantern Corps. They can make everything hunky-dory for Justice League Dark, or any Justice League team they've got going on. They can explain the chronology of the Robins, make Wonder Woman's history a nice, tidy little package, and do that for all that. But let me make myself explicitly clear, DC Comics. I doubt you're watching this, but if you do this and it does not involve Cassie Kane getting her good history and good origin back, I'm not interested. I'm simply not interested. I tolerated the New 52. I thought most of their changes were completely unnecessary. I saw little to no actual improvement, but I will say that most of the stories I was reading weren't horrible. But that's because most of what I was reading was Batman, and they didn't make quite as many changes to him as they did other characters. Of course. But Cassandra Cain, on top of being my favorite Batgirl, and one of my overall favorite characters, really broke the camel's back here. And not with a straw, with a sledgehammer.
First to kill, rising.
I can see the appeal in how James Tynion IV writes dialogue, and couple that with a capable artist who can give you a pleasing visual image. I can understand why some people would be okay with a book he's on. However, I don't simply look at dialogue on the surface. I don't only look at the art. I'm actually fine with most art styles. I can only think of one instance where I've looked at a comic's art and say, wow, I like absolutely nothing about this. But nothing about Cassie's new origin or history was good. And I know I've said this ad nauseum. You're probably sick of hearing it, even if you agree with me. The thing of it is, I'm not saying this as someone who thinks, well, everything was better in the 90s. I'm not saying everything was better. But in this case, with Cassandra Cain, her origin and her life and her arc were actually handled with a great deal of care. Whereas the way Tynion did it was kind of trying to be its own original thing, but at the same time relying on pre-existing knowledge of this character so he didn't have to get into too many details. And that's not even the worst of what he did. He decided everything about Cassie had to lead back to Harper Row somehow. It's like, that's not how you create an original character. It's certainly not how you reinvent a new one, especially one that didn't need to be reinvented.
No, and no.
Cassie's new origin doesn't really add anything. It's like George Lucas during the prequel trilogy of Star Wars. It's like, oh, Anakin Skywalker built C-3PO, isn't that cool? There's a little connection between the characters. Oh, Jabba the Hutt, he's officiating the pod race with Anakin Skywalker, which is being watched by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Oh, the connections. Chewbacca knows Yoda! Isn't that epic? No, it's not. And that's kind of a consistent problem in the Eternal books, is like, things that are important to a character's, that was important to a character's development, that was actually fleshed out and told very well, is now reduced to little more than a fun little Easter egg. It's like, Chewie knowing Yoda doesn't add anything to either character. Even Anakin building C-3PO years before he becomes Darth Vader doesn't add anything to either character. It never comes up in the sequel trilogy. You can't, see little hints and nods in the original trilogy, that might allude to it. So what's the point? If novelty is the only point, and you're taking that novelty and making it important over actual development and characterization, you've made a huge mistake. I can't give any details on specifically what to say, how to present it, because, well, that brings up a whole lot of legal things if DC happens to watch this video. I doubt they will, but you never know. So let me just say this. If the official DC timeline comes out and Cassie Kane, Tim Drake, and Stephanie Brown are all confirmed to have their old histories and origins back, Cassie and Steph's dads are not dead and weren't these blindly psychotic morons looking to murder their own daughters because someone thought that was dynamic or dramatic, if basically they get to ignore the Flashpoint reboot in its entirety and Harper Row is nowhere near their lives, let alone their origins, you done good. I would actually be buying more DC in that case, because as it is, I'm down to one title that I'm very close to dropping. So that's how you can improve things. That's how you can fix things, because you don't make someone the almighty Bat Messiah like you did with Harper Row at the expense of other characters, which is exactly what you did, and then kind of sweep her under the rug and only show her maybe a couple of times and then think you've solved the problem. You have not. And if you think you did, then that just confirms my statements about lazy writing. So, if you make these corrections, you can rest assured I will be buying more DC comics involving these characters as they become available. However, if the official DC timeline pops up and you've kept Harper Row as the center of the universe, this divine child that Tim is jealous of and Stephanie is subservient to and Cassie just revolves her entire existence around, then you've only propagated the mistake. These characters used to be strong and unique before the New 52, and you've already admitted, DC, that you screwed up there. So, fix the mistakes. I am not personally concerned with how poetic someone thinks it is that Cassie run around with a serial killer's name. A serial killer's name does not speak to who Cassandra Cain is. Black Bat speaks to who Cassandra Cain is because it's her own identity and it is a representation of the symbol she fights for. That's how Black Bat speaks to who she is.
I want vengeance!
So, that's another rant. Some of you have heard it before, but with this news about what DC's announced, I felt I kind of had to say something. They're probably not going to listen to me anyway, because DC has a nice long history of hearing valid criticisms and going la 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 la. But maybe, just maybe, if Dan Didio is willing to admit how he screwed up the New 52, maybe, just slim, microscopic little chance, maybe a little chance that this will fix my favorite Batgirl and some other characters I grew to love. And I'm not saying you have to necessarily get rid of her friendship with Clayface or stuff like that, but, maybe establish that friendship was actually built up and didn't just happen over the course of 3 panels or something. Instead of having to need Harper Row's permission to exist, Cassie would be her own person. Honestly, Harper added nothing. The Eternal Stories added nothing to these characters when they were retconned. So, if they added nothing, if they did absolutely no good, there's no reason to keep them. It's just that simple. So go back to what works, go back to what was well established, and then you can maybe have a Batgirl sale. Like, 30% off the trades of Cassandra's title, Stephanie's title, and throw Robin in there too, like the Batgirl and Robin sale, and add some of Tim's ongoing trades to that sale.
Wow, that's actually better.
Why not? Apparently, people really like the older stuff.
I just want my kids back.
Had to say it. Though I'm probably just screaming into the void again. I'm the Angry Spork, and I will see you later.